Hi everyone, this is David and welcome to the Week 2 Fireside Chat for Educational Leadership 655, Pupil Services and Nondiscrimination. The week begins Monday, January 31st and concludes on Sunday, February 6th, 2022. A recap. Terrific start to class. Thanks for making your post. Respond to your discussion questions by Thursday. And you need to make 8 total posts by Sunday night. Those can be just a paragraph long and make them concise. Check in with your learning teams. There are detailed instructions on your learning team project on page 13 of the syllabus. And if you haven't, check out that 14-minute keynote presentation that I posted in week 1. So some questions and reflection from week 1 of this course. First, thanks for sharing about your experiences with outside agencies. Outside agencies providing mental health and counseling services in schools is growing, and it promotes services in the least restrictive environment. Those service models also require us to consider and be aware of supplanting of services. What might we be giving up in the student's day in order for the student to receive the services? How are we making those priorities and making sure that we're documenting those, whether that be through an IEP process or through a 504 process. Leah wrote that she was able to navigate her district's website and find handbooks and policies fairly easily. She noted that she'd been working with the new EL program coordinator in her district to analyze existing documents, translation services, and other areas to increase equity. So nice job, Leah. Thanks for sharing that. Alyssa mentioned that the PowerPoint presentations in week 1, talking about the timelines of inclusive practices. She mentioned that her parents graduated high school in the 1980s, and well, I'm right there, also one of those 1980s grads. In the 1980s, special education was still largely a place and not a service. And kind of the same thing with counseling, and especially kind of with mental health services. Very much you'd go to a place. When I was growing up, it actually was a yellow mobile home building that was brought in and put in the back of the school. That was the special education place. So we had this concept of place versus service, and of course now much more with service. I want you to consider the 1983 PBS documentary, Children of Darkness. You can find it on YouTube. You can watch it for free. It examined mental health for youth, and it was in the early 1980s, so not that long ago. There's some pretty wild things when you watch that were accepted practice back then. It's what the science understood mental health to be. So society's made big strides toward non-discrimination practices, and some of that is simply with better science. Something is we're all kind of scientists right now. We're at the beginning of this. We're understanding this. We're documenting this. So I think we overlook that sometimes, right? If we go back to that 1983 documentary, Children of Darkness, and we think, oh my goodness, like the way things were back then wasn't that long ago. So as we're learning about how to provide services for students, counseling services, those were still very much at the beginning of that, emerging. So it's an exciting place to be, but to understand, we need to keep informing ourselves because we're going to get new knowledge on that. Some of you were able to locate your district special education percentage and the primary breakdown by disability, and others said, no, I can't find it, and the link that I had no longer worked. I spent an hour on the DPI's website, and I couldn't find it either. So this is information, though, that you need to have. Your district, every October, usually the special education director or whoever's overseeing Skyward or Infinite Campus or whatever system you have in your district will have that information. They will know how many students with primary disabilities of OHI, speech language autism, and so forth have been submitted to the DPI. Your district receives funding from that through IDEA. So those numbers are out there. You might have to dig around for them a little bit. And in addition to that, you want to know your 504 numbers. And how many students are identified for 504 because of anxiety? Medical report coming in. Other areas with 504, possibly allergy related. How does this interface with discrimination, the students' access to school, access to their peers? So be aware of that. Special education numbers in 504. Because ultimately, you're going to match staffing to that. You want to have trends, so you're looking over multiple years, and professional development matching to that with the overall thought of we want to mitigate discrimination that might be in these systems, right? If we have not been adjusting our, for example, counseling service, even though we have more students coming in OHI, and as we analyze those diagnoses, we're finding, oh my goodness, more of these students are coming in with concerns of anxiety, things like long COVID, mental fog, stuff like that. So observe for these trends. Again, OHI, and a number of you noted this is increasing. It's the trends are more students with depression, more anxiety, and I think we're going to see more long COVID, kind of just this mental, I guess, fog is what I'm calling it right now, is going to start to come in. And there's been some guidance already from the federal government on 504 and observing and being aware of long COVID. OHI might have a big impact on your school counselor staffing. I think people forget about that because they think, oh, OHI, it's special education. But again, as we know that OHI numbers are going up in districts and across the state, once we unpack those referrals and those evaluations, we're finding anxiety, mental health, depression, areas where counselors would largely be involved. Brooke posted that there is a organization in her community called Better Brodhead. And I went to the webpage and checked it out. It's very comprehensive. It's for community engagement. It does a lot of things that would support pupil services. What I took here is Better Brodhead is a community coalition addressing youth substance abuse, bullying, and dating violence among youth in the Brodhead School District through education, awareness, and advocacy. I think her district, 3,300 students, so kind of a smaller district, and this seems like a really well-established organization in the community. Better Brodhead has brought substance use issues to the forefront and assisted, this is from their website, the school district in developing a multidisciplinary leadership task force to address youth mental health and substance use issues. So the question as a Pupil Services is, how are you interfacing with Better Brodhead? What they're doing, how is that aligned to what your district is doing with your district policy and procedures for non-discrimination? And also, there's an interesting statement there. Better Brodhead has brought substance use issues to the forefront and assisted the school district. So it implies there's some kind of partnership there. So when you have these in your districts, just to be very clear on this is what the district is doing, this is what the outside group is doing, and then maybe any overlap in that, because sometimes the outside groups can take on the perception in some people that they are working off of kind of district leadership. That might or might not be the case, but just to be very, very aware of that. Best interest of the child. Hey, Tim posted about this in his setting. It is CISA Consortium. His setting is for students with high behavioral or emotional needs. The IEP has determined these students wouldn't be successful in their home districts, so they're going to this consortium placement. But he said, what's the next LRE option when these students no longer are deemed to be receiving educational benefit or advancing in his setting? And are we sometimes looking at too small of a window of time? Is it a rough patch that the students have hit, and then there's a consideration of a change in placement when maybe we need to look at the last 3 months or 6 months, and this is more of an anomaly. So it was a very insightful post. So how are non-discrimination practices woven into LRE placements and options? Some districts really just say, here's your option, right? Maybe one option or two, instead of working and figuring out what are maybe 5 or 6 options or more, and documenting those in the IEP. So the more robust you come at this with options, you're also having a non-discrimination approach. Many of you wrote of the quandary of acting in the best interest of a student and the impact that might have then on the best interest of other students in School of Errors. So your book for this course right here, if you go to pages 134 and 135, I wrote about best interest. And there's no clear legal definition of best interest, but it's something educators are expected to consider on a case-by-case basis. And best interest is dependent upon professional discretion. So from the book, Bagley and Stefkovich, again, pages 134, 135, also agree there's no consistent definition of best interest of the child. A content analysis of over 60 law review articles using the term best interest of the child, or a variation of it, revealed no common theme and no shared use. And so best interest will always be subjective and distilled from individual experiences, biases, perceptions, situations, and dynamic context. So you'll address that when you work on your learning team project and you assemble your allergy supports for Bruce. You might have a rock star allergy plan for Bruce, but who is afforded professional discretion to act in the best interest of jabbing Bruce with the EpiPen, if that's part of the plan? So looking ahead to week 2, all right, it's out there. Here we go. We arrive at this intersection of disability and discrimination. We will consider student allergies and how non-discrimination practices apply, from practices to include students with allergies with their peers during lunch or other activities, including field trips. We will also become aware of the DPI's resources for safe schools for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students. What are your Board of Education policies and school practices to mitigate discrimination in those areas? We will explore well-intentioned decisions for students with disabilities that are actually passive discrimination. An example would be an IEP team exempting a student with a disability from participating in safety drills, saying it would introduce too much trauma to the student. But in other words, are some of our student safety practices exclusive by design? Is your school safety drill, is your instruction not designed so it is inclusive of students with disabilities, maybe students with autism or students with orthopedic disabilities, and so on? So analyzing through that perspective. All right, we are ready. We're rocking, we're rolling, we're heading into week 2. You've done a good job. Keep going with your post. If I see anything where I'm like, maybe, I want to follow up with you on the number of posts you're making or some other thing, I'll let you know. Okay. So, and maybe next week or the week after, I'll post grades in the grade book, but I usually wait a little bit until I do that. And there'll be an announcement. It'll say grades have been posted. Here they are. So again, everybody is off to a very good start in class. We have this for the next few weeks where we have our weekly discussion questions and your post, and then that kind of eases off once we get into March. Once we get to March 14th, we get into that research module. So really we have just over a month and a half kind of where you need to be checking in very regularly with class, and then we pull back and you've got that research module, and then we get toward the end. Remember, the final for this class, you can either do it as a written final or you can do it as a phone call final. I'll have more information coming out about that maybe in a month or so.